Hey everyone. Before we begin on these stories, I just need to give you all a little warning. These stories are incredibly dark, sad, and brutal. I advise you click off this video if you cannot handle nor stomach very dark topics. These are real stories from real police officers and 911 operators. The purpose to do a video like this is to show just how truly scary reality can be, and what these people have to deal with every single day. Please show respect to these amazing people, as well as having the courage to tell their stories. All that being said, if you're ready, let's begin. When I was in my early 20s, I had a neighbor who was a paramedic. I really admired her, and we were good friends for several years. I thought that maybe I'd also like to be a paramedic, so she suggested that I go on a ride-along with her one night. At about 1 a.m., a call came in for a car wreck, and we sped right over. A family in a car had been in a pileup between two semis. The parents were dead on the scene, but their teenage daughter was still alive, crushed between the front and back seat of their vehicle, which then collapsed into itself like an accordion. She kept calling for her mother nonstop. It was the most horrific thing I think I've ever experienced. She didn't make it, and I never did become a paramedic. Dispatcher here. I had a woman call in on 911 whispering. Could barely understand anything, but I managed to get an address. I kept the phone line open until the officers got there. Officers get to the house and a male steps out. They ask him why someone dialed into 911. He says that it must have just been an accidental dial and there's really no emergency. They obviously find this suspicious, so they hang around outside talking to the male. One of the officers manages to spot a tiny hand stuck out of a small window waving around. They go inside the house and they save a female who was beat really badly. They charge the male with forcible confinement. To this day, it still makes my hair stand up on end. My grandfather was a cop for 40 plus years. He recently told me a story about getting a call from a neighbor saying they hadn't seen their neighbor. Let's call him Bill. They hadn't seen him for a few days. My grandfather and another cop named John shows up at Bill's house. They knock and knock, but no answer. They check the doors and, lo and behold, one is unlocked. As they enter the house, my grandfather starts calling out, "Mr. Bill, are you home? Is everything all right?" All of this goes on while they search the house. Finally, Officer John goes down the steps to the basement. My grandfather hears him say, "Oh, Mr. Bill, there you are. Is everything all right?" My grandfather goes down the steps to see Bill standing in his basement in his suit, complete with his hat, but there was one thing that was very, very off. My grandfather then goes, John, I think Bill is dead." Dumbfounded Officer John then says, "He's standing right there, what do you mean?" Don't you see the rope around his neck?" So, apparently Bill had hung himself with clothing line rope, tied it to a beam in his basement, and kicked away the stool that he was standing on. Over the however many days it had been, the rope had stretched so much that Bill looked like he was standing in the dark basement. Yeah, that was a really creepy one. Student paramedic here. I had a call being general broadcasted over radio when I was chilling in the base with my mentor operator, who was broadcasting something, said something along the lines of, "Female, reportedly unconscious, police on scene, major trauma, CPR in progress, confirmed arrest by police on scene." My mentor just looks at me. We're off in 30 minutes at the end of a night shift, but we go anyway. We're around the corner, but we make it there in no time at all. There's police everywhere, at least 7 squad cars. I'm really nervous, and so is my mentor. As we approach the house, a man then emerges, handcuffed by police. He looks content enough and smiles at us as we walk by. The police shout for us to hurry. We run over with the equipment to the front door, and we're met with one of the worst scenes I've ever seen in my life. And I just know that it's always going to be there in my mind. There's a woman lying on the ground with the left side of her head completely caved in. Blood absolutely all over the place, and brain matter scattered around the floor as well. Police are doing CPR. We stop them, and we see that the patient has signs of pulling and rigor mortis. I'm literally sweating, and I'm on the verge of tears. This isn't how I wanted to end my shift. Then we hear from behind us more police in the house, and the sounds of children. 2 kids are escorted out of a bedroom behind us with their eyes covered, and one of them asks us, "What's going on? Where's my mom?" My heart just completely melted. I've never been extremely traumatized by a job, but those kids being shielded from what just happened to their mother will forever stick with me. I bring equipment back to the ambulance as my mentor starts to do paperwork, and we wait for someone to move the body. Social services arrive and they take away the kids, blissfully unaware of what's just happened. I was finally off 3 hours later after all of the paperwork and interviewing from the police. It's a really good job, but man, it's left its marks on me for sure. This actually happened a few days ago. I'm an ER tech, but one of our unit secretaries is an EMT in the next county over. I was waiting for a patient to return to their room, talking with her when she looks down at her phone. She tells me she has this dispatch app or whatever for ambulances and fire trucks, and every fire hall in the county had just received a call about a possible decomposing body. Apparently the neighbor had called about a terrible smell coming from the property. Hazmat was called and everything, expecting a dead human body. Once they broke into the house, they found that it wasn't a dead human, but 38 dogs in the house. 11 of the dogs were dead and in varying states of decomposition. The place is still pretty much under wraps, but there were 16 more dogs that were found in the shed yesterday. The 2 people who own the house have since been arrested and charged with 51 counts of animal cruelty. All of the animals left alive were taken to the Humane Society, where half of the county has just about donated food or blankets. The whole thing is pretty messed up, but I now for sure respect the hell out of the EMTs and the paramedics that walk through our doors every day. They really never know what they're going to see when they walk into somewhere. I really respect them for what they do. I've been a 911 dispatcher for 11 years in a medium-sized center. We have more than our share of crazy calls, but there's only a few calls that have really stuck with me. For me personally, the ones that I can't get rid of aren't even close to being the craziest or most brutal. About 7 to 8 years ago, I took a 911 call from a man who came home to find his adult sister had been raped and beaten. The suspect had wrapped a telephone cord around her neck, then tried to push her through the window of the apartment. He was understandably very distraught. She was still alive, and she was able to talk to me. She hadn't been blindfolded, and I was really certain that I could get a description of the person who had done this to her. She answered all of my other questions, but absolutely refused to give me any info on the suspect. I later found out that the reason was self-preservation. The person who did it was the brother who called 911 for help. He was so believable, it really messed me up in my head. I also felt horrible that I had continued pressing her for more info when the person who hurt her was right there, and that I could have potentially put her in more danger without realizing. That call, though, it really got to me. I took a call from a man whose 1-year-old daughter fell in the pool while unattended. At the time of the call, she wasn't breathing, unresponsive, and had no pulse. My partner dispatched out fire and EMS while I was on the phone. Got to the child's mother to start CPR. Fortunately, she was certified and didn't require very much instruction at all. Just had to tell her to count her compressions out loud so I could keep up. Before the first responders arrived, the baby starts breathing again. I believe she sustained some brain injury, but nothing life-threatening. Had to go take a walk around the block after that one. Please, If you aren't CPR certified, get certified. It very well may have been the difference between the child living and dying. A young man who was 23 years old called and told me he was going to commit suicide. He was my first call on my shift that day, very early in the morning. He planned to set his car on fire with himself inside of it. He was very upset and crying, but he apologized to me. He said that he was sorry that I picked up the phone, and he was really sorry for how this was going to affect me. He hung up on me, and the second time I was speaking to him, I could hear liquid splashing in the background. He ended up hanging up again, and I never got him back. He did end up setting the car on fire, and it was fully engulfed by the time anyone got there. I'll never forget his name or the voice, and I simply hope that I showed him some kindness and compassion in his last moments. That call will probably stick with me for the rest of my life. I just know I'll never forget it. This one still bothers me because it's so fresh, and our community is hurting from it as well. Took a call from a hysterical woman advising me of a rollover crash that had happened near her house. She lives near the top of a blind hill that people like to jump. Like catching that butterfly feeling in your stomach, although you can get air in the right vehicle. She tells me that a girl is laying on the ground about 30 feet or so from the vehicle. When asked if the girl is alive, she then says, "Oh yes, she's alive. She's wiggling around on the ground. My daughter is a nurse and she's checking on her now." Awesome. We hardly ever are lucky enough to have a trained professional on scene before a med unit can get there. But then she tells me her daughter is starting CPR. To be honest, that didn't really surprise me. My caller was getting hysterical again, and we already had first responders on the way, so I started asking more questions about the scene. Her daughter breaks CPR to get on the phone with me. She tells me that she can do compressions only, that the girl's jaw is completely gone. A bit stunned, I tell her to continue compressions, but rather than getting put back on with the original caller, I heard the scared voice of a teenage girl, the driver. "Is my friend going to be okay?" I can't find anything to say for a moment. Finally, after what seemed to be way too long, I say, "They're doing CPR, dear, and we have help on the way. Are you and the other passengers okay?" "We're fine. Please just tell me she's okay." The girl on the ground was confirmed dead on arrival. She had been laying down in the back seat without her seatbelt on because she had a headache. She was only 15 years old. Dear God. For me personally, the worst ones are always the calls that you can relate to on a personal level. I took a call last month from a father who discovered his son with a bag over his head and a note next to his body. Now, I've taken a lot of suicide calls, but this one was particularly difficult for me because the son was my age, and the way that the father pleaded with his son was almost exactly the same way I've imagined my dad if I were to ever do the same. I've had the same, "Come on buddy, don't do this to me," running in my head at least 2 to 3 times a day since. Also, not technically a call, but my first shift on my own, I dispatched the deputy that I did my ride-along with to a domestic that he ended up being shot and killed at. Hearing his blood-gurgled shots fired scream on the radio won't be something I'll ever forget. On my second full-time shift, it was about 11 p.m. on a Thursday night. We get a call from a female screaming. Just screaming. That's all we heard. We lost connection. Second 911 call came from the neighbor across the street. I think I just heard a gunshot, and now our neighbor is screaming, yelling for help. I think something terrible happened. While my partner was getting more info from caller number 2, 911 rings again, and it's the original caller. She's still screaming, but she's trying to speak, even though I can't understand anything she's saying. After a couple of very stern verbal slaps of "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and tell me what's going on," she's finally able to tell me that she thinks her husband just killed himself. She went on to explain to me that they were watching a TV show together. Everything seemed normal, when he then got up and said that he would be right back. The wife heard the back deck door open and close, and then she heard a gunshot. She ran to the door and just saw his feet and legs lying down on the deck. She called initially, but she was unable to control herself and accidentally hung up. She was still a complete disaster when I talked to her, but I was able to get the basics of what happened and relay the info to the responding officers and fire. She kept telling me that she needed to go outside and help him. Do I need to go out there? Do you need me to go out there? I don't want to see him. I can't see him. My only job at that point was to try to keep her calm and keep her from getting up from the corner of the kitchen floor where she had collapsed until police arrived and secured the weapon. They had been married 27 years, had 2 kids, 3 grandkids, and lived a happy life together. She had no indication that anything was wrong. Her husband got up from the couch, walked out onto the back porch, and blew his head right off with a black powder pistol. I don't remember her name, but I will never be able to forget her screams. I worked for a dispatch company very similar to Life Alert. An older lady in her 90s thought someone was intruding on her property, and she called the cops. She had severe dementia though, and she had forgot she had called the cops, so when they rang her door she thought that they were the intruders. She hit her wrist button to get in contact with us. Then she got out her gun. I then called the police while also talking to her, and literally on the recording you could hear her taking shots at the police officers on scene. They were all freaking out while I tried to talk her down. The police and I eventually got her to calm down and stop firing, but apparently she had missed an officer by just 6 inches. The family had to get involved, and she ended up moving to a nursing home shortly after. Dementia sucks. I've been a police dispatcher for a little over 2 years now. The one call that I'll never forget is the first suicide caller I ever got. It was around 11:30 p.m. and this girl calls 911. She must have been around 19 to 20 years old. All she says is that she's just calling to let me know where to find her body. I ask her where she's at, an address, intersection, anything. She tells me that she's old enough to know that I already have her location, so she doesn't need to give it to me. That's not true. All I actually have is the location of the cell tower that her cell phone is pinging off of. No way I can find her. I plead with her a bit, and she finally gives me an address. Then I ask her how she's planning to do it. I'm trying to keep her on the line as long as possible so she doesn't actually hurt herself, but she doesn't answer me anymore. I decided to get the paramedics on the line so we can get the police and fire rolling to her location. While I'm connecting to the fire department, I hear this crash and a choking sound. I don't know what she did, but my heart completely drops. I'm thinking she killed herself with me on the line. I give the address to fire department and have police department on the way. I'm listening on the radio while trying to get this girl to talk to me again, when I hear the officers ask to verify the address. They don't see a house there. Shit. I finally get this girl to come back on the phone and she's crying hysterically. I ask her what happened and she tells me she was in the bathroom and she tried to hang herself. She was too heavy and the bar to the shower curtain bent. I'm a bit relieved because she's not dead, but she's still in danger. I asked her to give me the address again, and even though she's not on the same street, her address is further south. Shit, I have to get officers in EMS that are closer to go. I start talking to her, and so far so good. The officers get there, but they can't find her. I'm now freaking out because I'm thinking she gave me the wrong address again, and she stops talking to me again. Just an open line. I don't know what to do. There's just silence. I attempt hanging up and calling her back, but no answer. I'm thinking I messed up now. I ask my supervisor if there's anything else I can do, and they just reassure me and tell me that I did all I could. I listen to the police radio for a bit, and I see that the officers managed to get into the house and find the girl, and that she was being transported to the hospital. It was a huge weight off of my shoulders. I took a break for a few minutes to collect my thoughts and went back to answering more calls. We were busy. I have shared this story before, but one that really sticks out to me is this one with a 14-year-old girl that calls the police for a disturbance. Officers show up and everything seems average. Parents advise that the reporting party is upset because she isn't allowed to go out with her boyfriend. Officers are getting ready to leave after being there for 40 minutes, but something seems off to them. The two officers take the 14-year-old outside near their patrol units to speak to her. While they're walking outside, the girl's mother, stepfather, and two sisters go and stand on the porch to see if they can see what is going on. They're unable to hear due to the officers and girl being on the other side of the street. It was then when the stepfather started pacing and went back inside. The girl breaks down and she then tells the officers that her stepfather had been sexually assaulting her for years and he didn't want her to go see her boyfriend because he was jealous. The officers look up and at that moment they see the stepfather shoot the mother in the back of the head. He proceeds to shoot the reporting party's older sister in the chest and her younger sister in the leg as they started running away. One officer returns fire while the other one is shielding the reporting party. The stepfather runs inside and barricades himself. The reporting party then tells the officer that her two younger brothers are inside with the stepfather. Backup arrives and they surround the home. The officers make forced entry after they hear gunfire from inside. They storm the residence and they find the stepfather has shot himself in the head with his two biological sons in the same room. The mother died instantly, the older sister died instantly, and the younger sister was hospitalized. I don't know if she made it, I just know she was flown to a hospital miles away. This little 14-year-old just lost her whole family. Later, the investigators were taking her statements, and her only reply was, "Last time I tried to tell someone the truth, I lost my family. Doesn't matter what I say. I'm alone now." It took us hours to get in contact with the family. Eventually, we were able to get in touch with her grandparents, and she left with them. I think about this kid a lot, and I really hope she's okay. There's a few calls that I'll remember for a really long time. One was a guy who, while riding his bike, saw a father running after his grown-up son. He was yelling to stop him, and that he wanted to hurt himself, that he wants to jump in front of a train. When the guy was calling, he was running after the two near the train tracks. I quickly sent their location to dispatch and stayed on the phone. The guy asked if he could tackle the son if he had the chance, so I told him he could do what he deemed fit but should always think of his own safety first. However, he then started yelling that the train was there, as I could hear it in the background. He started cussing and screaming, and I immediately knew that the son had in fact jumped in front of the train. He died instantly. It was horrible for everyone involved. The guy immediately started blaming himself for not being able to stop it and save the guy. After all that happened, I took a short break and then got back to the calls. No matter how long I do this job, it never gets easier. I took a call from a woman who told me that her 15-year-old nephew had locked himself in the garage during a family gathering after making suicidal statements. I stayed on the line with her until my deputies could get on scene. Before they got there, however, the family was able to gain entry to the garage only to find him hanging by the neck from the garage door opener while burning to death. Apparently, he had doused himself with gasoline, lit himself on fire, and then dropped with the rope. I'll never forget the screams of horror from the caller and the rest of the family in the background when they saw him, as well as the cracks in my sergeant's voice as he yelled for more units over the radio, as the family started mobbing them when they arrived on scene. It was tragic, and I can't even fathom what that family went through. This job really sucks. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Once again, if you'd like to submit your own story to me, be sure to submit it through my website, which is www.southerncannibal.com. Just click the big red button that says submit a story, fill out the form, and then send it. Also, before we bring this video to a close, I want to give a huge shout out to all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beryl S, Beth A, Kate E, Katrina T, Celeste S, Ellie S, Emily W, Howard R, Jonathan C, Joseph F, Lori J, Matthew B, Michael G, Steph L, Tammy S, Terry H, Too Etchy For You, and Victor R. Thank all of you so much for supporting me on Patreon. I really appreciate it more than you know. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thank you everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always